Yes, I'm also a dancer, an actress, horsewoman. There's a long list of things in addition to being a director and writer. But probably, I know as well as anybody that probably what I'm best known for is being married to the sexiest man alive. My husband was Patrick Swayze, very talented, vibrant, unpredictable, generous-hearted man who had an incredible career, particularly in the acting realm with movies like Point Break, Ghost, Dirty Dancing, Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. He didn't have a favorite movie. He loved all of them for very different reasons. He was also a man that was, he was fearless. And you never quite knew what he was going to be doing. And he was always challenging me to push the boundaries of what I thought I could and couldn't do. And like one of the examples is with flying, because he had the flying bug. He wanted to be a pilot, but he wanted us to do everything together. Me, I wasn't so interested in flying. But he buys a plane, I go, oh damn, now I'm gonna have to learn how to land it. So I go and take lessons. I changed my mind about flying. I love flying, it's the best thing ever. And my husband likes to brag that I went from someone who didn't want to fly to someone who, when he said, look, I'm going on location to shoot a movie, I'll take the plane. To which I would reply, no, no, honey, I'm dropping you off. So, with all the challenges that we had in our 34 years of marriage, and we had plenty, and we lived on a very kind of high out there level, there was nothing harder than facing a diagnosis of terminal cancer. There's nothing that can prepare you for that. And when you get that news, your life turns on a dime, and nothing is the same. And you know in such a profound way how really true that is. I know that when we first found out about it, we were in the hospital, and after everyone had left the room, we'd just gotten the news, and we spent all day looking like deer in the headlights, and trying to act with as much poise as we possibly could. We were finally alone in the room, and he turned to me and he said, I'm a dead man. He didn't know much about the disease, or I didn't know much about the disease, but he did. And he knew that everyone who was diagnosed didn't last very long. And it's true, most of the doctors were very blunt with us. In fact, in many cases when you get a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, the doctor says, don't even bother to treat it, just go home and get your affairs in order. Because generally by the time you are diagnosed, it's already an advanced stage. There are stats like less than 6% survive to 5 years, 75% die within the first year, and after diagnosis, generally your life expectancy is 3 to 6 months. Well, Patrick wasn't the kind of person that was going to take things lying down. So what we were going to do, we were going to fight it. And we always like to call ourselves realistic optimists. We knew what these statistics were. We knew what we were up against. We wanted people to tell us the truth because we can't do anything with a lie. But we could do something with the truth, no matter how bad it might sound. So we were never afraid to ask the tough questions. How long have I got? What's going to happen when I do this chemo? And we went out because there's very limited, meaningful treatments for this particular cancer, we had to go outside the box and get into a clinical trial and take our chances, because the other ones were not effective enough in treating the disease, and they were very few. He was lucky enough to get into one, and he actually, out of 75 people, was one of 2 people that did well. And instead of the 3 to 6 months life expectancy, which, you know, you look at all the stats, this is why the National Enquirer was so confident that he had only 5 weeks to live when he was first diagnosed. Well, 8 months after he was diagnosed, 6 months after the National Enquirer said he was already going to be dead, he was here in Chicago. shooting the series The Beast. He was working 5 days a week, 14 to 16 hours a day, getting chemo on the weekends, and as we say in Texas, he was kicking ass and taking names. So his whole journey with this is he was that kind of personality that he wasn't going to let cancer tell him what he was or wasn't going to do. And actually his doctors had said, do you want to take a vacation? Do you want to work? You really have to think about this. And he couldn't see himself going on vacation. So in wrapping up on this series, the thing with a lot of cancers and chemotherapy, and why people work so hard to try and find newer, better treatments. But in our particular case, we knew that this was going to eventually happen, was that the disease would get wise to the chemotherapy and build a resistance. And as we're coming to the end of shooting the beast, that was starting to happen. And I tell you what, you feel like a gunslinger when you're fighting a disease that's as monstrous and deadly as this. You know, because we'd look at those scans and we'd see the indications that things weren't working and what happens to your heart when you're fighting with every breath in your body it's incredible. At the same time, though, you stay totally cool because you need to think about your next step because your life is really precious. Going into the second year, the last 10 months were not quite as easy because we started running out of our treatment options. That's when he went on a Braxine where he lost his hair, like every woman does when they have breast cancer. It's a breast cancer drug. One thing, though, is that Patrick, through this whole thing, always had a sense of humor. And he used to call himself the king of irreverence. And he and his brother Donnie got a great kick out of taking phrases and turning them, but to call jokes on himself, one of which is that the Dirty Dancing line that's so famous, nobody puts baby in a corner. Well, he and Donnie were rolling on the floor one day. I said, what? He goes, nobody puts Patrick's pancreas in a corner. So still have found reasons to laugh. But one thing, as challenging as it was, and from the day we found out that he was ill, we knew how this was going to possibly end. And there's no way you can't start grieving right from day one. But at the same time, the gifts that you get to experience and learn along the way are immeasurable. So often we let fear get in the way, and particularly when you're fighting an illness like this. A lot of people don't react very well. In Patrick's case, he became a better person than he already was. There was a humbleness and a wisdom that was so admirable in what he displayed, in his kindness towards others. But not everybody reacts that way, and rightly so. People sometimes get pretty darn angry when their mortality card looks like it's coming up. They get afraid. And what can happen is that fear can put a division between us. And it could have separated us. He could have lashed out. I could have pulled back. But in actuality, we just kind of took each other's hands and jumped in together. And to use an airplane metaphor, there's a wonderful little story about how it used to be in the old days, if your plane went into a spin, that was it, you were dead. There was no recovery from that kind of from a spin in a plane. Until one day, one man did it. He recovered, but he had the presence of mind to remember what he did. And what he did was at complete odds with what is our natural instinct. Our instinct is to go in there and jump and fix things and right it. And the way he fixed it, he pulled the power off, and he took his hands off the yoke. And only then did he step on his rudders and start. But it was such an incredible thing that in order to deal with a life and death situation, that you gave up control of it. And basically, I feel it's one of the more valuable lessons with Patrick and myself during this journey, because we shed the fear. We said the fear has to sit in the back seat. It can go crazy later, but not now, because every moment was precious. I better get to the point. Unfortunately, the terminal illness diagnosis was probably the hardest thing I'd had to face in my life at that point, but it was nothing compared to the decision to let go, because he did get a rolling infection, which he was not going to recover from. And to make that, well, you know what, we're so hardwired to survive. And anyway, I have a thing that I wanted to say about that, and I'm just totally, it was the hardest thing to do, is to let go. And I always promised myself, because Patrick and I raised a lot of animals, and after jumping through hoops to save a lot of our animals, surgeries and treatments and all of that when they were really sick, when we probably should have let them go, we finally learned that actually it's an extreme act of love and kindness to not make someone hang in there. And I know in some ways Patrick was doing a lot of hanging in for me. And I promised myself that when that moment came for my husband, that I would be willing to let go and not have him suffer. And that, for me, and anyone who's been through something like that, they know what an act of kindness that is, and love. And it was probably the best thing I could possibly have done for him. Second only to helping him with that transition out of this world. Taking him home, and that going from treating to comfort was a huge, huge leap for me. Because I've been fighting so hard for him to stay alive. And all of a sudden I was in a position where I had to learn how to help him die. But I tell you what, and there are a lot of hospice people that came in and helped, and I could see why a lot of them get addicted to this process, because it is something so precious and sacred about helping someone make that transition. It's such a delicate, beautiful process, and for me to be there as he passed, and I was afraid that I'd be freaked out, and go all, and it wasn't strange at all. One thing in facing death, you can really learn how to live. I know that when Patrick and I were going through this whole process, we let a lot of our layers shed away because we had to travel light. We didn't have time for all this stuff to get in the way. So that was my second most harder thing, and everything just kept on getting harder. And even harder still was having to learn how to live after he was gone. There's grief is not, no, but if anyone told me just how bad grief can be, I missed it. I missed the info, it was just, it was so much horrible than I ever thought it would be. And it's not an emotional, the thing is, I'm used to being able to adjust my attitude, but this is not something that's emotional, and it's not even intellectual. It's the proverbial wave, and it will take you and it will crash you whenever it pleases. And it does so for a very, very long time. Of course, there's also the fear of future, because you wonder how you're going to get through the next day, let alone the next moment. And but you just put one foot in front of the other and you keep going. And it's like learning to walk all over again, except that you're missing a limb now, because you do become a part of each other. And carrying this weight is heavier because you're carrying the whole load, whereas you used to share it with another person. And I used to think I was very self-sufficient, and I have my own independence and everything, and I found, no, that's not true. When two people join like that, they do share. And the world looks different, and you look through the world through each other's eyes. And the world's very, very different when it's only yours. But in this time also, I wrote a book, which just goes to show that it's another one of putting one foot in front of the other and making it through and learning on an inside way of how to live my life again. And it's like starting all over. It's like starting all over, but I'm starting with some precious gifts, some incredible, incredible gifts that I got to learn from him and our journey, for not only through his illness, but through our whole life. And I'm just going to leave you with, there's this Princess Bride question, which I don't watch Princess Bride, but this was a great question. And I do this tweet, I tweeted it. And the question was, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And a woman tweeted back, and I just thought it was beautiful. She said, I would live instead of just existing. And then there's this other quote that I love also. It says, the brave may not live forever, but the cautious do not live at all. We have such a precious gift here while we're here on this earth, and more than ever, I'm struck by how short it is. There's no time like the present to do what you want to do, to be who you are, and by all means, tell the people you love them as much as possible. I love you is never wasted. And there's never a moment to waste. So thank you very much.